There is a bond that is so deep when we open our home, our embraces, and our daily lives to a pet. There is an energetic exchange that happens. There's a trust they have in us. It is so appropriate to feel that they are part of the family. It is so real to feel heartbroken when they pass. In so many circumstances, it is our pets that we are with most often. They know the realest, unguarded versions of us. Sometimes they're the only ones who really do, yet they unconditionally continue to show up for us. Each Sunday, I'm reading a chapter from Sacred Hellos, Messages from Heaven, my book all about grief and loss. I'm so glad you're here for this next chapter of Sacred Hellos. Losing a pet. We adopted our dog Ralphie in 2010. He was a mix of yellow lab and we believe collie. We think he was around 2 when we got him. In the year before he came into our life, I'd lost my mom, had an ectopic pregnancy, lost our previous dog Sam, retook our honeymoon, held a friend's hand during her chemo, and traveled to Texas to introduce my husband to my daughter's relatives. It was quite a year. We were ready for some calm and something new and exciting for us all. We found Ralphie online on a rescue site. Once we met him, it was love at first sight. Over the years, as our youngest was born and the kids grew, we eventually moved across the river from Minnesota into our little house on the hill in Wisconsin. Ralphie loved running alongside the Jeep through the woods while we collected firewood. He would sit at the top of the driveway on lookout, protecting us from the world. He loved a cool night and a good sunset. He would always appear to be taking it all in, just loving life, happy to be alive. In the fall of 2019, we noticed a few things were changing. Ralphie had lost a lot of weight, and he seemed to be ravenously hungry all the time. My fear was that he had gotten into the chicken droppings and had developed something from that. Instead, we were given the diagnosis that Ralphie's body was shutting down slowly. He had advanced kidney disease, made worse from the Lyme's disease he had. We did not know if we had weeks or months, but decided to honor him and work diligently at thanking him for being a part of our family for the last 9 years. Within days of the diagnosis, Ralphie changed. He laid more, he stopped running, and he continued to drop weight. We made a large blanketed area for him in the basement by our bed and upstairs on the living room floor. Throughout the week, each person took time to lay with him, pet him, and love him. Looking at this dog who tried so hard to please us, it was heartbreaking to imagine that he could not do all he was used to. I believe if he could, he would have held in any sign of his pain to make our lives easier. I have always tended to be more standoffish when it comes to my pets. We've had so many pets growing up that I've kept a distance a bit. I think it was a self-protection sort of thing. With Ralphie, though, he had seeped in and gotten my heart. I did not recognize this person that I now was. Each day I would sit with him and talk to him and cry. Ralphie, we are so glad we got to have you as part of our family. Thank you for bringing us so much joy. That was in one of his final days, taking in the sunset. Thank you for bringing us so much joy. We love you so much and we are here to help you. It's okay, boy. You did so good. You are such a good boy. Tears would stream down my face. Sometimes the words would flow easier than others. Within a couple weeks, Ralphie was barely eating. I would spend the day working and teaching Aspen's homeschool while Ralphie slept. We took little moments of time to spend with him in between other daily tasks. I'll never forget the day where Bruce carried Ralphie outside in the morning, then carried him back into the living room upstairs before he left for work. I had to go to the workshop up by the garage, and I told my son Aspen to keep an eye on the dog. 5 minutes later, I came back inside and noticed Ralphie was not in the living room. It had been a few days since he had walked much on his own, so my heart dropped as I went running from room to room trying to find him. Then I eyed the long staircase to the basement. I was scared to look. I was so scared that he had attempted to walk down and had fallen. Deep breaths. I worked up the nerve to peek around the door frame to see the basement. There was no sign of him. So I walked downstairs and looked around, and there was Ralphie lying peacefully on the floor by our bed. I will never know how he mustered up the strength to get down there. He stopped eating altogether within days of that experience. For water, he would only take an ice cube here or there. He was fading. He did not appear to be in any pain, so we decided we would allow him to pass at home. As long as he seemed comfortable, we would do what we could to make that happen. Honestly, this was both beautifully sacred experience and an in-our-face, heart-wrenching decision. I am glad we were able to make this choice, but I would never judge someone who would have instead taken Ralphie to the vet and had him euthanized at this point. Had I not worked from home and had he shown any amount of pain, or had Bruce not been able to carry him when we needed, there were so many factors that had one of those things been different, we would have had to make a different choice. Ralphie would still eat ice cubes for the next few days. After that, he would allow us to wet his lips. And by the last couple days, we would set a washcloth and wet his mouth for him. We would wet a washcloth and wet his mouth for him. He mostly slept. He would muster the strength to change positions occasionally. And even up until the last day, he would wag his tail when we entered the room to show that he knew we were there, even if he did not lift his head. It's funny how imagining that just... Dogs are so special, aren't they? Just how much love they just keep giving. A few days before he passed, there was a gorgeous winter sunset. We wrapped Ralphie in his favorite blanket and Bruce carried him outside. We came inside and let him have some alone time outside. It was a beautiful gift to watch him stare off into the sunset that day. It was also a realistic step for us to surrender a bit of control and let him have this experience. The last few days, this is not graphic, but just a little bit raw. So if you are super sensitive or just in a place where you don't want to hear the details of these next parts, fast forward about 5 more minutes. The last few days, his muscles twitched more as they released energy. He never appeared to be uncomfortable. The biggest unexpected thing for me during this process was trying to make sure we were doing all we could for him. I would separate this into another category. Having a pet pass away is one thing, and it is devastating. Having a pet die and handling the physical logistics of that process, especially with a large dog, is a different mental and physical feat. Looking Ralphie in the eye day after day, trying to understand what his needs were, while honoring that he was on his own journey, it was not easy. Actively dying is not easy on the body, and it was a learning process for me, a trusting process. I worried that Ralphie would walk into the woods on the colder winter days and then change his mind and be too weak to get back, and I would be unable to lift him while Bruce was at work. I worried if he was suffering in any way. Was I noticing? Would I notice? Were we making the right choice? Were we being strong, or were we being selfish or weak by keeping him with us? Twice I called the vet to talk through how Ralphie was doing and got reassurance from them that they could come into the house if we needed or if we changed our mind. All these thoughts ran through my mind on a loop. In the end, I tried to think of everything I had learned and everything that came to me as I prayed for wisdom and calm. What ended up being the strongest and wisest message that I clung to was this: I can handle this. I can simply hold space for Ralphie. I can trust that I will know what to do. I can call the vet for assistance. I can do internet searches. I can call Bruce to come home from work. I can trust that Ralphie has an inner knowing and instincts, and I can assist him if I'm needed, but I can also trust that his body and soul know what to do. That final morning, I woke up and spent a few minutes with him as I had each morning before. I set his head on my leg and I slowly and gently stroked his back. Over and over. I wet his mouth and I thanked him again. Okay, I'm going to pull it together. I assured him we would be okay and that it was okay for him to go. I told him about my mom and our other pets who were on the other side waiting for him. He put his paw up on my leg that was stretched out in front of me, and I put my hand on it and tried to imagine myself energetically exchanging gratitude and love with him. Okay, I'm going to just reread that. Okay, I put my hand on it and tried to imagine myself energetically exchanging gratitude and love with him. After a few minutes, I had to head upstairs and begin homeschooling with Aspen, and told Ralphie I would be back in a little while to check on him. Around 9:30, I asked Aspen to go peek and see how Ralphie was, and he came running back upstairs and said he wanted me to look. Ralphie had managed in his final moments to move off of his blanket, and I found him across the room. He laid so peacefully, his back to me, and I held my breath as I scanned him and realized he had passed. I tried to be stoic, but I failed. I sobbed as I looked back up at Aspen, who waited at the top of the stairs. I mustered all the strength I could to walk over to our beloved dog and cover him up with his blanket. I felt relief for Ralphie. I knew he was no longer suffering, but I felt sadness for us. Later that day, we buried him on a special place in our property. I was grateful to the strong man I was married to. I thought back to the night we found out Ralphie was sick, and in his own way of coping, Bruce had went outside to a specific spot near the woods with a shovel and a trailer and started digging. He knew the ground would soon be frozen, so he had thought ahead and dug a large hole and then covered it with plywood and put the trailer of dirt in the workshop so it would not freeze. I was grateful again for this physical detail that Bruce had thought of, a way that he felt he could best honor and show love for his dog. We had a small ceremony that evening for Ralphie. We thanked him again, and we each said things we would remember most about him. I believe it's important to ceremoniously stop time and bring reverence to such moments. Honoring the dying process for Ralphie was such a sacred learning experience that there is no rushing death, no planning it out, no outsmarting it. Instead, we are left with allowing, honoring, and observing. It is up to us to find ways to actively infuse love and gratitude into the sadness and uncertainty. This process, strangely enough, prepared me for another death that would show up just a few months later in our lives. I learned another lesson as well during this experience that I've never really understood before then. There is a bond that is so deep when we open our home, our embraces, and our daily lives to a pet. There is an energetic exchange that happens. There's a trust they have in us. It is so appropriate to feel that they are part of the family. It is so real to feel heartbroken when they pass. In so many circumstances, it is our pets that we are with most often. They know the realest, unguarded versions of us. Sometimes they're the only ones who really do, yet they unconditionally continue to show up for us. Here's the other illustration. We actually cut a little piece of that collar, and it's on our Christmas tree each year as an ornament. Just a little piece with the hook. You guys, I did not expect to get that emotional reading about Ralphie. I thank you for being here. That's the only chapter in this book about pet loss. And I had experienced that as I was writing this book, so it happened at the time where I could capture it. But this is the book I'm reading from, Sacred Hello as Messages from Heaven. I'll put a link in the description. It's on Amazon and Kindle. It makes a great gift for someone who's experienced loss. I would recommend it on maybe the anniversary of the loss, not directly after a loss. As you can see, there's some stories that trigger a lot of emotion that can be really helpful at a certain point down the road, but when we're still so thick in it, a lot of the things that I share in this book aren't lessons that are for that time. They're for a little bit later as we're putting life together again and reflecting and trying to learn the lessons from all that we've been through. So, if you have a pet you want to honor or tell us about in the comments, I invite you to do so. Or any stories there. It's pretty amazing how every once in a while we let our dog now sleep at the end of our bed, and I'm like, it's just so bizarre to me sometimes that we have this animal that just lives with us and knows what we're saying and can respond to things and curls up, and it's pretty amazing. It can offer things sometimes that humans can't, and sometimes there's a lot we can learn from them. Thank you for being here. I invite you to join me again next Sunday as I'm going to read the next chapter of this book. Let me see what that chapter is. The weeks after. This was a hard time for me as I was pulling it together and still in survival mode, and what that really looks like in the weeks after a big loss of my mom. You're also welcome to go back and check out the other videos from this series. I'm going through and reading this entire book, along with a little bit of my own updated thoughts on it, since it's been 5 years since I published the book. So, thanks for being here. Bye.